If someone is not a really good golfer, and let's say their minimum double digits or higher, or even newer golfer, why should they get fit? Or should they get fit?
You cannot get your equipment. Well, I will always stand behind. For me, the golf swing is the most important piece of the whole. And if you cannot develop a sound fundamental golf swing, you'll never play this game and enjoy this game the way you should. So fitting is, for me, the link between being able to swing as consistently as you want to swing and get the consistency of the result you want to achieve. The golf club is the link between those two things.
Mm-hmm.
You can make consistent golf swings, but your golf clubs are inconsistent. You never get consistent performance. And it's very, very difficult if you put the wrong clubs to get your golf ball to fly correctly.
Yeah, that simple analogy I used to use was you wouldn't run them to the end of your street in a size 8 shoe if you were a 10, or you wouldn't wear a 12. If you want to become a decent runner, you're going to have to get the right shoes. So absolutely get fit. Even if you're just starting out, get the length right, the lies right, and some basic things right.
100%.
And so very, very excited. And I've been waiting to do this one for a long time with Ian Fraser. So Ian, I'm very happy to have you on here. I'm sure a lot of people have been asking when I was going to get you on the show. So it was fun. Excited when you said, yeah, you could do it. And then we just worked on the schedule. And now here we are doing the recording.
Well, morning, Pete. Thanks for having me on. We have been talking about doing it for quite some time. And I love doing these things. I love doing podcasts and talking to people, especially like yourself, that have such a well-rounded knowledge and sort of such a network within the game. When you look at all the guests that you've had on and the breadth of knowledge that's been shared on your channel, it's quite incredible. And I can't really think of another channel that would really rival it in that sense. So I'm honored you asked me to come on, and I'm excited for where the conversation might go. You and I really haven't teed this up with any context of what we're going to talk about, which, in all honesty, is my complete preference for everything I do. I've tried doing structured stuff. I don't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when it's very off the cuff, very organic, and much more natural. Just two dudes who love golf who are hopefully going to share some nuggets out there with the audience.
There have been some very big names who I've reached out to. I said, would you like to come on, or we'd love to have you. And they said, well, what are you going to ask us, or can you send us the questions? I said, no. And I said, well, how come? I said, because I really don't have any. I mean, I have a few notes and bullet points just of things that, if you follow somebody long enough, you can see the comments and what people are asking. And if they're working on something new, I'll write those down to touch on. But for the most part, it's all ad libbed. And it's more, the answers aren't pre-rehearsed in somebody's head. So it's coming from whatever the first thing that pops in their head. And when you get very good people on, usually the first thing that pops in their head is the right thing, or at least it can be debated as the right thing.
100%. And you've done this for long enough that you know the game. The quality of the answer is only a reflection of the quality of the question. So you've done this enough to know that, you're going to unravel, a guest on the channel how you want to, based on your line of sort of what's in your own head. And I'm sure you're as curious as every other golfer.
Mm-hmm.
So, we used to always talk about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about our YouTube channel and what we built with the TXG channel and things like that. But we had one golden rule on there, Pete, and that was prior to the camera rolling, we did not talk about anything related to what the subject matter of the day was. That was the only golden rule. We just would not talk about it whatsoever, just so that we didn't spoil any of the stuff that would, potentially come out and have to try and remember. What was that? How did we say that again? It just never comes out the second time as good.
Mm-hmm. As I look across the golf world at people who have very successful YouTube channels, you being one, Eric Sigorno being another one. Sorry, that's my little assistant here in the background.
That's a guard dog.
That's my 15-pound guard dog. But I'd look, and I think a lot of people look at you guys and just marvel at your ability to do that. I would almost I know Eric's doing it now, but with your success, and I know you're rebuilding and not starting from scratch, but you're starting again. And I've already got, I think, 63,000 followers, but almost having a class where you teach for that as part of, maybe one part of your, I know you have a 3-tiered system of membership. I have no idea. I'm tech challenged when it comes to this stuff. So I don't know. I'm just throwing an idea out to you that I think could be beneficial to you as someone who likes to help others. And I think a lot of people who follow you and who know who you are look at your material and say, man, I need to step up my game. I'm like, we were talking the pre-show. I'm one of them. Like, I got to get together with you and just pick your brain on how to do this, because it changes so fast. And if you don't have a foundation of general knowledge about making videos and getting in front of a camera and talking, and then how to edit it and logos, then they need somebody like you that's an expert at it and has been very successful. So maybe that's another of the Fraser
But
Golf Institute, maybe the Fraser Video Institute.
we actually have something cooking on that front. We do. And a bunch of things you've spoke about, but there's not really much material. If you're young, Fraser, 20 years ago, and you have a hunger for golf equipment and a passion for helping people, and you want to tie those things and marry those things together, there's not really something out there that helps you learn how to do that. And whether that's club fitting or whether that's taking it into the media space and learning how to do it, it doesn't really exist. I still get people ask me all the time, how did you get to where you are and how can I follow that path? I couldn't possibly ask someone, well, I could, but the likelihood of someone following the path that I've followed, they'd fall off the track at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I guarantee that they would. I said, okay, it's going to take you 15 to 18 years to get to the destination. Are you okay with walking that path? Not a chance. Or they may say yes, and then within 6 months, I guarantee they're not on that path. So, yeah, we are working on some things related to helping more people get into this game and into the nuance of club fitting. Again, I guess we'll get to the origin story at some point, but I sat in my year one residential in Birmingham at the Belfry, and around the whole year group, going, okay, what do you want to be? Teaching pro? What do you want to be? Head pro? And I was the only one who said I wanted to be a club fitter or in the golf equipment game, not one other person. If I knew then that what I know now, and I went, there's about 80 people in this room, and I'm the only one who wants to do it. So I've got about, I've got to be 1% of the people in the golf industry who want to do this. My chances of success are fairly high if I can apply myself properly. Mm-hmm. I would have read that room quite differently back then. I didn't quite understand the scale of that at the time, but I still think that is the case. I still think if you went to a group, a PGM program, PGA program, whatever it may be, and you said to the year group, who wants to be involved in golf equipment and club fitting, you might get one or two, maybe, but it wouldn't be many.
No, it's everybody, and I don't know if it's just because most golfers either grow up playing, or I did it because it was something to do in the summer, and then started caddying at the local private club. And I'm just going to assume that you see your introduction to golf and what you're used to from an early part is you see the assistant professional, the head professional. I don't think they're exposed to the fitting side. Or the equipment side, I'll put it that way, because Ben Showman, I don't know if you know Ben, he's the tour rep for Cobra and Puma. He's a friend of mine. He's been a very good friend of my brother's for over 20 years, and he's a Ferris guy. I was at Ferris State for the 50th anniversary of the alumni event. I went there, and then they kicked me out after 4.5 years. They said, "You've been here enough. You got to go." But yes, to your point, I think that if more kids were introduced to that, and I have a call with a kid today from Ferris that I met up there, and I'm going to mention your story to him and say, look, have you considered the equipment side? Do you like that, first of all? Because as you said, if somebody you told somebody you're going to be 15, 18 years to get to this point, well, I don't know if I really want to do that. If they don't have a deep interest and somewhat of a passion for the club side of it, then when they get to the hard times, they might not get through and they might get knocked off that track. So I always ask kids either if they want to play, if they want to be a director of golf, head pro, assistant, club guy. I said, well, what do you have passion for? And then tend to follow that, and you're really going to probably come out on the right side of things.
That's the name of the game. What is it you enjoy doing, and how do you apply that to something that can obviously earn you a proper living and things like that, and stay on that path for as long as you possibly can? I remember getting some advice from my golf coach growing up, a guy called Steve McAllister, who was a two-time European Tour winner, just the best guy you could ever have as a mentor growing up. And he said to me something when I was trying to play full time. He said, Ian, he said it's about, it's just sort of how long can you keep trying? How long can you stay in it? You know you're going to get better every year. And at the time, I didn't really love playing professional golf, if I'm being honest. I didn't love the travel. I love the work ethic. I love the application of the practice and doing everything to get better. I just didn't love tournament golf. I just, it didn't fuel me the way I hear other people who talk. When you hear a Scottish Scheffler talking about playing tournament golf and loves to compete, I love to compete. I just didn't love to play tournament golf.
Mm-hmm.
And that bit of advice always stuck with me, but I just applied it to club fishing. That you just got to stay in it and keep getting a little bit smarter, keep meeting people that you feel like know something that you don't, and keep going down that path. And he was 100% right. And it was a bit of advice that he gave me on something else, but it stuck with me for this journey. And, I'm sure again we'll talk about mentorship, but having people like that around me in the early days really shaped my mind in terms of what it would take to achieve mastery in whatever your chosen field would be.
Yeah, I think Tony Robbins, a lot of guys are Tony Robbins fans, and they listen to him. I believe he said one time, the only time you fail is when you stop trying to progress, meaning you give up. Using the example of going back, I had not been to Big Rapids at Ferris State since the day I walked off that campus 31 years ago. And to go back after that amount of time, when you're there, and we always used to ask each other and the people who ran the program, who came up with the idea to stick the first golf program in the northern part of Michigan? It made zero sense. But, it was a grind for two reasons. One is I think every kid that goes off to school, university, or wherever they go, has to go through the learning experience of being responsible for themselves, getting themselves out of bed, the whole growing into an adult growth cycle. The second part of that, which was the hard part, was Ferris State is located not very far from Lake Michigan, Lake Effect. So it was overcast a lot. We always used to say it's overcast 8 days a week. So that was difficult when you want to be in the golf business and somewhere sunny. But what I'm getting at is when you go back after so much time and you can reflect and you're like, wow, I did my work. I got through there and it's a great accomplishment. And now after so many years, it's very fun to go back and just kind of take it all in. It's like going into a time machine. I mean, a bunch of us, there were about 12 of us from our class. I think we had 30 or 50 that went to one of the old bar. Well, two of them are there. One's 100-year-old restaurant / bar, wooded wall, looks like a pub from where you might have grown up. And then the other one was the big bar, and that opened about our junior year, and it's still there. So we went there, and it was like walking into a time machine, or you're in a time machine, you stop, and it's like, wait a minute, all these kids in here, 18, 19, 20 years old, and we're 50, 52. Wait a second. where did 30 years go?
Slaps you right in the
Yes.
face. I know.
But when you were doing that, was there a compelling moment that you said, or that happened, an experience that you said, I want to pursue the equipment side and the fitting side?
Well, so if I kind of strip it back a little bit in terms of what I knew, I didn't know that was going to be the vehicle. What I did know is I loved to help people, and I loved to make people smile, and whatever that may be. So when you go through the PGA program, obviously it's like a tasting menu, isn't it? You get a little bit of sampling of coaching, you get a little bit of sampling of maybe the biomechanics side of things. You get your structure around the club and being a general manager. So I knew I didn't really like any of those things. I enjoyed the coaching side of things. I'm very technical in my mindset. My dad used to always kind of say, if you just, don't overthink everything in your golf swing, and I would, my introduction to golf was I guess later than some. I started when I was 16. At that time, I was already a top 10 badminton player in Scotland. I was already playing football at what would be considered, I guess, like, introductions to semi-professional. So I was kind of playing, state level, everything in sport. And when I kind of took up golf at 16, I just kind of, applied myself in a way that I thought I could have an advantage, which was to practice more than anyone else. And my dad would drop me off at the golf club and he would go out and play his Saturday medal round and he'd pick me up when he finished. So I just thought, well, if I go out to the practice area when he gets there and when he finishes, he'll pick me up. So I would stay there for 6 hours every time you go to the golf course. And I thought that was normal. And I think I probably put about 5 or 6, maybe 7 years of work into about 2 years, and I turned pro after 2 years. So from playing the game at 16 to turn pro was literally about 2 to 2.5 years. And so the game kind of came fairly easily and fairly quickly. And then it was a case of, okay, what other stones can I unturn to get better at this game? Because I've got technically proficient enough. I can do most of the stuff fairly well. And it was really during that process, Pete, that I found this equipment seems interesting. You can get clubs that go a little further than others. And this was kind of early 2000s. And this was kind of really pre-TrackMan. It was pre-interchangeable anything. But I had a couple of guys I remember, Andy Hanna and Miller Hatton, wherever they are in the world, I would want them to know that their names are always in my head, that they used to tinker with equipment when I was a young assistant pro, and Andy used to come in the pro shop and talk about, I put this new shaft in my driver, but I didn't install it all the way in because I wanted to kick a little bit more. And Miller Hatton at the time, was again a club builder, the hobbyist, and he bought an ERC2 driver, right? Remember the illegal one, the one that became illegal. He put a graphic design YS6 in it. And I'd played enough golf with Miller, and I was a good golfer, but he's kind of a 2 and 4 handicap. Never very long, a bit of a carvy slice. Overnight, gained 30 yards on everyone. And I'm like, what is this witchery that's going on? What is this kind of witchcraft that's doing? So those guys were influential into me. That I started then, you get preferential terms with companies. You might get a driver at 30% off wholesale, and I started spending my wages on golf clubs. And then I got inquisitive enough to ask my grandfather, could I build clubs in his garden shed? He had all the tools and everything I would need. So I started just doing some repairs and things like that. So that was really what kind of inspired me at that point, is just, like, gosh, what are the opportunities, but what are the possibilities that we can unlock? We've got 14 clubs in the bag, and each of them seem quite different from the other. What is it we can possibly unlock it from a performance perspective? And I think my mindset, 24 years on from when I first started doing this, my mindset's exactly the same. What are the possibilities that are available to us from doing this? Not changed one bit.
It sounds like very much like Steve Jobs, the mantra he had at Apple was stay hungry and stay curious. If you keep that, and again, going back to what we said earlier, if you follow something that you really enjoy and you're passionate about, it's easier, not easy, but easier to keep that curiosity and that passion, because it's like every door you unlock, there's a whole new bunch of information. You're like, okay, how does that work with what I think I know, and how does it change? And you work on that for a number of weeks or months or years, and then you open another door, and it's like, oh my God, here's a whole bunch of new information. It just never ends, especially in today's world. The fitting it, obviously technology, we're advancing. We've advanced since 2000. We'll take that. Now, I don't want to go. People see the white and gray in my beard. We don't need to go back further than 2000, because then we're getting.
I had to shave mine so you didn't see it mine today.
But it's really advanced since 2000. As you said, the ERC came out. I don't know if club companies or manufacturers, engineers said, hey, here's what the face is doing. This is illegal. How can we make it as close as possible and not have it be illegal? Metallurgy and things like that. But are there things that you still see in someone who's been in this space, and one of the best in this space, that there are still common denominators when you do a fitting that you did early on that you still do today?
Yeah, 100%. There's still very common things that I would look for. There's certain relationships and correlations that between a player's speed and one thing I kind of, the very first time I ever got my hands on a track man. I remember 2006, we were at Glen Eagles. We used to have, at this point, I started working for TaylorMade in late 2004, early 2005. And 2006, we used to get the opportunity when the WGC events were on, we would get access to the tour truck, the TaylorMade tour truck at the time. And a good friend of mine who now runs the Mizuno tour truck and European tour, Alex Thorne. Alex was with us at Glen Eagles for a tour fitting day, or tour experience day, TED they used to call them. And I'll never forget, he's got the tour truck parked up on the side of the driving range at Glen Eagles, and walks down with this grey suitcase, and he kind of unpacks it, and out comes this orange box and sets it up in a laptop stand, and I'm like, what's that over there? And we had what was called the Mat Eye system at TaylorMade at that point, which was a camera-based launch monitor. Yeah, you remember it. So we had launch monitors, but this little thing starts moving itself, and it's kind of self-leveling, and just watching him do this, and he sets up his kind of Panasonic Toughbook was what you got with a TrackMan in the early days. Sets up all this kind of very robust looking stuff, and I'm just kind of watching. Yeah, this is different. This is what tour life is like, and we had a couple of really good players come and hit on it. Start to see kind of like this ball plate tracking sort of software, and start to get these numbers, and I can remember it, Pete, like I'm there right now.
Mm-hmm.
I can still remember the place I was standing on the range. I remember the whole scene unfolding to the point where I can remember it so vividly. And that was the very first time I ever saw a TrackMan. Got my first TrackMan to use myself a little bit later in 2007. I remember seeing some things around, when I would see someone and we tested off of a 6-iron in the bay, and if I saw someone really hit a nice 6-iron, generally the apex of that ball flight was exactly the same as the speed they would swing their 6-iron. If they came in and they swung the 6-iron about 85 miles an hour, I would generally see within 5 feet, 80 to 90 foot window, I would see that ball apex in there. And when it did, ball speed, launch, and spin was exactly where it needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And some people had a little bit more of launch and a little bit less spin, and vice versa. But if they achieved that peak height and the land angle was where it needed to be, and they were efficient enough with it from the strike location, I could kind of start to see some real interesting patterns that would emerge. And it was all just through just working with this system every single day. And I just remember thinking to myself, there's a bit of a code. There's a bit of a code that we can figure out and really start to help people. And as I saw people get obsessed with all of the numbers, and I think there's still an obsession with the numbers to a degree. I had to say, okay, work with my golfers to try and get them to hit an apex that was appropriate, and that would take care of ball speed, launch, and spin without me being obsessed with pulling one lever and not getting the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Time. So there was things like that in the early days that are just that kind of, people in the learning world would call it the chunking of patterns. You're able to sort of recognize what's going on, and you see something enough, that it becomes a pattern in your mind, and you just rely on that for a successful outcome more and more. So, yeah, those were certainly the early days of understanding that this technology was something that would really drive us on, and that we were on the sort of the cusp of something very special. And being at TaylorMade at that time, TaylorMade were on a meteoric rise. You'll remember it through the mid-2000s, right? TaylorMade almost went out of business as a club fitting company around the time of the the burner Firesole products, when they stopped making those orange-headed ones, and they released the 300 series.
Yes, that kind of resurrected them.
That really did. They changed their whole model, and they had sort of 3 different heads. They had the 300, the 320, the 360, and on tour there was a 360 tour it was called.
They had a forged cavity back, because I had a set. That was when I was playing. My neighbor, we lived 2 buildings apart. We were very, very close friends, still are. He was a TaylorMade staffer, so whatever he didn't use, I mean, off season it was like Christmas. There's a box at his door every day. We go play or practice. We come home for lunch. there's boxes. So he'd go hit him, whatever he didn't like, I got it. So it was like, like a younger brother. So it was great for me. But I had a set of the forged cavity back 300s. I think they
Amazing.
had the 320s that was like the subtle game improvement. And then the 360 was for your higher handicaps, as well as the drivers. Not, I might have that wrong a little bit. Sure, someone will
No,
correct me.
you're bang on. You're exactly right. And
Now,
that
remember the Tom Lehman blades? That they were
I
more
do.
square toed? Those are really,
Yeah,
I really liked. I could never get my hands on a set of those.
yeah. There was some amazing ones. There was a set of it was kind of like the 300 series Fords or the 300 Fords. Ernie used them. I can't remember. It became like an XCI something or
Hmm.
other, and it was very very similar. But there was TaylorMade were doing things at that time, and I was so fortunate to be in that place at that time because they were really making such strides with technology that the innovation was just ramped up. So you go from the 300 series to the 500 series, kind of, you go into like a 510 CP, a
Yep.
legendary driver that so many people had such incredible success with. And then comes the 7 series with the movable weight. When we start to see CG adjustability, and I start hearing from the boys on tour, of stories of working with Justin Rose at Wentworth at the PGA Championship and moving the weights to the toe and roadie gains, 2 miles an hour ball speed by moving the CG around them. Start to go, okay, this is interesting. Movable weights and stuff. Drivers don't normally have that. Then along comes R9 and you can start interchanging head and shaft. And if you think about the things that happen within that short space of time, the increase in speed of innovation within one company,
Hmm.
and real TaylorMade were leading the way at that time. I think Callaway were a bit lost in their direction with doing Diablos and kind of Octanes and things like that. They just got a bit lost. And Titleist were making still an evolution of that 975 series that moved into the 975J, and 980K was quite good. But that was evolving, but it's nothing like what TaylorMade were
Mm-mm.
doing, right? Weights and interchangeability and this and that. And then I remember you used to get there was an R7 TGB Max driver that came in a case and it was interchangeable. It came with 3 shafts. It came with a high launch shaft, a mid launch shaft, and a low launch shaft. And all of this is happening. So repeating lights have just went
Okay.
out and I have
Yeah.
no idea why. 1 second, I'm going to turn them back on. 1 second. I must be sitting too still. So yeah, so all of that was going on, and I just was in the right place at the right time. I feel that I just got such a front row seat to this kind of innovation chain that was occurring, and TaylorMade was driving that. And it was incredible, and I had incredible mentors, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. But mentorship to me is everything.
Hmm.
Like I've had so many people that I would call mentors, and I had amazing people around me at that time, who I still call dear friends today, and I really lean on them for their advice and expertise. So yeah, I think that was a lot of luck. That was to be at Glen Eagles that day, to see the TrackMan and be influenced by that, to then be a company like TaylorMade. I could have been working for thanks to Cobra, but I could have been working for Cobra or anyone at that time because I had a passion for golf. It just happened that I landed with TaylorMade. I don't believe in accident. So I think I was in the right place. I was meant to
Yes.
be at that time.
Amazing how it kind of circles back to when you select something that you really enjoy and love.
Oh,
If that's your beacon, that's what you're following, then good things seem to happen when they should.
I say to my wife all the time, I've always believed in the law of attraction and attracting things. I believe it because I've experienced it, and I continue to experience it to this day. That we were talking there about an online course, right? So not giving too much away, but we are looking at doing something along those lines, right?
It's coming soon, everybody. You heard it here first from Ian's mouth.
I had a guy reach out to me on Instagram the other night regarding a post I put on about my own swing, just saying, he said, I want to thank you so much for all the work you do in the online space. I've learned so much from you, and I don't know if this means anything to you or but I just know that I kind of want to offer out my help. That if you ever want to do anything on the online learning space, this is what I've been doing for the last 10 years, and I would love to help you in any which way I can. Now, how has that happened where he and I have made that connection? So he's seen something on Instagram. he thought, I'll reach out to him and I'll be kind enough to offer my services and something that I have a need for in this exact space and time. So for anyone who's kind of in this space who doesn't believe in the kind of law of attraction or or there's no real coincidences, I don't believe. Um, it's all meant to happen. So you just got to keep rolling in the right direction. Keep very focused on what it is that you actually want, and clarity is the key to that. Being very clear about what the outcome needs to be. I don't do vision boards, and I don't mind if people want to do that type of thing, but mentally, I don't let things go. If there's something I want to do and there's an outcome I want to achieve, I do not let that go, and it is laser etched in my mind until it happens, until I move on to the next thing. And I think that can help a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it helped whether they're just getting started in golf or they're coming out of school or they're in business and they're not happy, they're not with their production. I mean, I think that is a fundamental that goes across the spectrum for everybody. And it's so easy in today's world with all the distractions we have to get pulled away from that laser sharp focus, clear intention on what you want to do. And if you don't do it on a regular basis, it's like anything else. It's going to get weaker, weaker, weaker. Maybe take it for granted when you're doing it. If you haven't made the mistakes of letting that go in the past, and I'm speaking from my own experience, it can get away from you pretty quickly. But just like your swing, you can say if you practice
100%.
for years and then you don't do anything for 6 months, 9 months, or 2 years or whatever, and you say, oh, it'll just come back in a couple weeks. No, it'll come back. It's just not going to be a couple weeks, maybe even a couple months or even a full season for you to get back.
Without a shadow of doubt. And to be honest, there's lots of parts of my life that I have not applied that to, and they have not been as successful as a result. It just happens to be the one thing I've stayed on the path the whole time with is this club fitting journey and this sort of golf performance space that I think is where we can help so many people in their passion of the game. But I definitely haven't. I wish I could take my own advice in all the different ways that I'm talking about, but it just happens to be golf that I've experienced it and I know that it's true.
Well, for you, in your opinion, what has been the biggest game changer as far as club fitting is concerned, with all the advancements and everything? And just at a generic level, what throws me off, because I was in the fitting space 20 years ago, and we used to fit 6-iron back then was the norm, and now it's a 7-iron. And I tell people, well, that's because the stamp on the bottom is different. The loft is pretty close to the same.
Yeah, it's really.
But that's just a very, very basic example to kind of give the listeners some context. But in your opinion, from being it and doing what you've done over a long time, what has been the biggest game changer in your opinion?
I mean, it has to be the internet, the ability to share information.
Mm-hmm.
Our ability to connect and share information has to be it. I used to go up to my dad's office. He never had a computer at home where I could sort of go on a website and sort of scroll through all the company's spec sheets of all the different clubs that they had out. And now I just think information is so readily available. I'll just be sitting, at certain times, and I'll type something to Chat GPT around, what does the future of club fitting look like? And I'll go down this like pathway with it. My God, the answers Chat GPT gives me when it comes to asking those types of questions it blows my mind. So, that 20-year journey I always talk about, and in the path that I had to kind of walk to get to where I got to, where I am today, it can be expedited quite significantly because of that, because of how readily available information is. So you can really, I look at our, the staff that I had working for me at TXG, I looked at how proficient they could become, and it wasn't weeks, it wasn't even months. It might be a year and a half, 2 years down the line, and I go, my God, you're a good fitter.
Mm-hmm.
I'd listen to the things they say, and you're good at what you haven't been doing it that long, and I think that's the biggest thing. We advanced a lot of different things. The ball has impacted it a lot. The launch monitor, the other sort of technology components that we have available to us now, but it is the availability of sharing information.
I do remember that we were talking about frequency and shaft flex before the show, and measuring people's clubs and their profile of the shaft and all the things the variables that go into a fitting. But when somebody would come in and their shafts were grossly off, I'm talking 30 cycles, 25, 30, 30 plus cycles. And then you would get them into a shaft that fit them all the way around. Or what we would do, we would give them three. We would give them the one on their number. Let's say their 6-iron was 285 CPM, get them their length, their profile, everything. And then we'd have one that was a half a flex stiffer and one is half a flex softer. And then we would do another hitting session. Then we would say, okay, which one feels better? And we would have their chart there that had the recommended one. And most often it would be to the one that the owner's computer system had recommended. But when somebody's clubs were grossly off, 25, 30 cycles, profiles way off, they would say that none of these really feel that good. They feel better, but they don't feel that good. So where I'm going with that, the question is, how do you balance the data that you have with all the ways that you're able to gather it today and your experience, and then the feel that the player is having and the feedback that they're giving you? How do you balance what you know they need to be in, even though where they're coming from is so off base that it's not going to feel probably the best at that present time, but it's going to work towards that way?
Well, having the right options at your disposal is really the key to that. Making sure that you've got a demo matrix that is broad, that you can achieve what you want to achieve, but you can give what they want to receive. So I would always talk about shaft that at the time, probably around that kind of 2010 time, the graphite era.
Mm-hmm.
You remember sort of, even the Harrison titanium era, those types of shafts were getting really low in torque at that time, 2.8, 2.5. Remember the Fujikura speed of 757 was again, really low in torque, sub 3 degrees of torque. And, it's starting to get that correlation between a golfer saying, knowing what they need. They need stability, and they may need something that kind of minimizes deflection of the dynamic loft. And I remember sort of going, I don't really have this. This player said they don't like the feel of this. It's too stiff. It's too boardy. And then I would understand that at that time, other shafts would come along. The Mitsubishi Kurakage XT, and it came along. It was a little bit higher in torque. It was 3.4, 3.5 degrees of torque. But I knew how stiff it would play. Rory was playing it.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Day was playing at the time. And I would give that shaft to people and go, that's the feel. I want to feel something that I can actually feel the shaft a little bit. This thing was CPM high, but from a feel perspective, was exceptionally responsive to the golfer. So I was able to kind of get what I wanted out of it and give them what they wanted out of it. And that was just having the right tools at my disposal. I'll never forget working with some Scandinavians in the UK. They typically, and you see it with Stenson, you see it with Peter Hansen, there was all those boys. They didn't like to feel the shaft for some reason, so they would go into the 2 point something degrees
Mm-hmm.
of torque and tip it a little bit just to kind of minimize any of the flex. You see somebody who's maybe a bit more of the old school, who's came from an era where the shaft was the timing device, and you'd have to give them something that paired up with that timing. Yeah, it was creating, and I still do it to this day with our group that I work with in Hong Kong. We talk about the balance of our demo matrix. We have criteria of weight, flex, EI profile, torque. We go through all of the list of important things in shaft. We create a matrix, and we make sure we've got shafts in every single box within our matrix, so that I know that if I need a player that comes in and needs a certain EI profile, but they tell me that they don't like the feel of a stiff shaft, I can move them more in another direction. We've obviously learned as well that if I change the head profile, if I move the CG location deeper, I can make that shaft deflect more as we
Mm-hmm.
try and get the head and shaft CG in alignment. So I can change the effect of that shaft in motion by changing the CG location on the head. So there's all those sorts of little tricks that you've got up your sleeve once you get deep into the golf space. And it's just you just learn ways in which you can manipulate things.
It's very, very interesting how you said once the CG and it was in motion, because
Mm-hmm.
I was getting into it. And as you said, it usually takes someone 2 years to start to become very good in the club space. And I spent about 3 to 3.5. But as I started to learn more about the physics and engineering of a club head. And one of the guys told me that if you want to change the CG of a club head statically, you have to have the same club head, basically the heel of the new one sitting on the top of the toe of the second one, to move the CG a quarter of an inch. And I said, well, how does lead tape work so well? And he said, because once you put a club in motion at 100 plus miles an hour, a couple grams will completely change everything. And it was so simple. I mean, back then, as he said, all these things are coming out, TrackMan and all these different technologies, and things were changing so quickly. It's like, oh my God, it's right in front of you. You're looking right past it. That once you put it in motion, things change very quickly.
Well, success leaves clues, doesn't it? And we've kind of always known things about, if we use a blade iron as an example. Why over the years have we always seen the better players gravitate slightly toward the heel on a blade iron? Because better players chase the CG.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even saying actually better players, because that would be something that over time I've probably came to realize, that your handicap is not a reflection on what you may be aware of within the golf club. And, used to see people and someone who pick up a golf club and they would say to you, oh, that one feels a little bit heavier. And I've given them the same shaft at the same length. And, I've picked out two different heads from our demo matrix, and they're all supposed to be balanced. 6 irons, about 260 grams. And I thought, okay, interesting. And I'd weigh the two heads. One's 258, and the one they felt heavier is 261. And that, it might be a 19 handicapper. What I inherently learned was, people are generally right. So I never, ever dismiss something that someone says about how a golf club feels, because that feel is correct to them. My job is to interpret, what did he mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
So and sometimes we get to the point where somebody would say, yeah, that club feels, a little bit heavier now if I give them a lighter shaft. Well, it's not got heavier. They're just more aware of the head weight. And the head weight is at the opposite end than the handle. So when the distribution of weight has changed, so it's my job then to explain to them what they're actually feeling when they feel like the club got heavier, even though I've taken 20 grams out the shaft weight.
Yeah, that's amazing. One question I have is, when you have the matrix and you have the variables, you have weight, you have torque, you have flex, you have bend profiles and everything else like that. So you can somewhat group them based off of a number of different things. We won't start at the first step, but once you start to get into, as you were discussing, the torque, and once you get lower in torque, I think I was looking at UST's page the other day. They've got a couple irons in the 1.8 or 1.9 torque range. I'm like, my God, that's got to feel like swinging a piece of rebar. But how do you start to go through the process in your own mind of this person, or how do you determine, are you going to bump the weight maybe on the shaft? Are you going to lower the torque? Are you going to go slightly stiffer, slightly softer? How do you formulate that in your own mind? That might be too broad of a question, given everybody. You could have two twins and they could be different, completely different, how you're going to fit them.
It's a brilliant question, and it is the question that should be asked more. The part of the time I have right now on my hands is exploring things that I feel need to be explored for us to do a better job within this club fitting space. And the process of the fitting is top of that. So how do we know what a player really needs? I mean, we live within this safe space of boundaries on club length, swing weight, grip size, total weight. All of these things, we live in such small sort of boundaries and constraints. I'm sure the guys over at Forward Golf, Chad,
Mm-hmm.
and the guys over at
I've been following
them.
some very interesting things they put out there.
Brilliant.
Yep.
And they're absolutely on the right path. And Chad and I chat a little bit online, and I'll drop in from time to time just to say, keep exploring the things you're exploring, because it's the right thing. And he's happy enough for a golfer to walk in and have a range of swing weight from B2 to E2,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll test it. That never happens in the club fitting day. People will get maybe the chance to try something D0 to D3, but they don't get the chance to kind of explore the full range of possibilities that might unlock something truly transformational for them. So that has to change. And there's difficulties in that. That matrix that I talk about we had at TXG was probably 450 shafts. It was every head basically from every manufacturer. We had all the weight kits and this and that. It was extensive and it was extensive and it was expensive to try and do. So if you try and expand that, and it just becomes more expensive to try and do that. So it's not easy, but there's ways in which you can do it to offer out the opportunity for people to try things. And the testing protocols, you've got to be aware of how much influence someone has. If I hand them a graphite shaft and they've never played a graphite shaft, that subconscious bias, little flicker in their mind starts to ping. And then you go, finger shaft. He doesn't think I'm very fast. And then all of a sudden, the swing they swing and starts changing and stuff like that. There's all sorts of parts of the process. I see a day, Pete, where we actually, before we test clubs, and we kind of used to do this at TaylorMade at the old mat lab, with the kind of mat system, and you wear the suit. And we were talking about Michael Neff earlier, and Michael was the guy from the mat system. He was the one who trained us all on it. And there's a part of the process that I think that needs to happen where it's like, well, how do you know what swing weight works best unless you go through the full gambit? How do you know what length progression you need unless you test the length progressions that are available? Do you need swing weight matching? Do you need MOI matching? Do you need more offset, less offset? How can you be influenced by all of the variables? Grip size. We're starting to learn that the smaller your hands, the bigger the grip. That actually makes more sense, that you have more control of the club head if you have a bigger grip when you have smaller hands. Who would have thought that a few years ago, when all we used to look at, okay, show me your left hand, your longest finger in your left hand,
Right.
Does it touch your palm? Well, that's a ridiculous way
That
to
never
do
made
anything.
any sense to me. I'm like, because every grip I grabbed, I could almost, I'm a little 6'5", so my heck, just about, I'm like, I'm not putting a 20 wraps of tape on a jumbo grip to get it to where I can't get my hands around it. It never made any sense.
No, exactly. And there's all of these, when you start to dig into it. I mean, we were just talking about shaft variability earlier. You start going into every golf club and we start talking about the variables. I mean, it's in thousands, really. So how do you get through that process where you can take someone in an unbiased environment, build it in an environment that is truly a appropriate stress test for the golf course as well? There's no point testing in an environment that is not reflective of the golf course, where you can't create the same stimulus for the golfer. You have to be able to challenge them and the way their mind works relative to the task. You would never take an Olympian and have them train in a way that they're never going to experience the night of the 100-meter final in, LA when it comes to it. You're going to try and recreate as close to that stimulus as you possibly can. So we have to do a better job in the fitting process of changing the status quo in a way of it not being the way that it's always been done. Just because it's always been done one way doesn't make it right.
How do you differentiate as you work with such a broad spectrum of golfers that come to you? You've worked with some of the best in the world. I'm sure you have people that reach out to you who are more or less novices or beginner level, or let's just say 18 plus handicap. How does your process with them differ, and how does it similar? Similar meaning you're working with a human being. Differ, of course, you have elite versus novice, but just think a lot of people would love to hear how you do that, how you go through that, or would be
Well,
very curious to hear how you do that.
yeah, I would think that it is more similar than people would imagine. In the sense of, the first thing we have to do is strike up a connection, right? We're going to try and figure one another out a little bit, and that became easier for me in the club fitting space when people found me through the YouTube channel and they had an idea of who I was, and they'd watched a lot of videos, and they maybe even knew a little bit about my personality or the football team I like or whatever that may be. So, we would connect a lot sooner. And actually that made my job a lot easier. And they also walked in with trust. And that's a big thing. Whether I'm working with, a golfer who comes in that I've never met before, or I'm working with Gary Woodland on the range at the RBC Canadian Open, the first thing I need to establish is trust. And we have to try and get to the point where I'm gonna ask for some things. I'm gonna probably ask them questions that maybe are not questions that person has been asked about their golf equipment before, and I need that person to trust me that we're just working our way towards the outcome, which is a better flying golf ball.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do that with a beginner golfer, and I would do that with a tour player. I think one of the things that has always stuck in my mind is a elite club fitter is 25% golf instruction in their mindset and 75% golf equipment in their mindset.
Yeah, you have
Andrew
to be.
Rice, you have to be.
Because you got to know what the club issue is causing in their swing, and then here's going to be the feel that you're going to get with this club and how to make an adaptation. So yes, most don't understand that at all.
Right. And Andrew Rice taught me that a long time ago out at Atlantic Golf Club in the Hamptons. And, he said that to me. He said, I really think my job as an instructor is to understand 25% of what's going on with the equipment and 75% of what's going on with the swing. And he said, I think your job is to do the opposite, but to the same ratio. And it really stuck with me. I thought, that's brilliant. And I think I always kind of deep down knew that, but I don't think I ever really made the correlation, so that when I'm in the bay, I go, okay, what's causing that ball? Like, what's all the swing thing? That. What's all the club thing? Because I want to get the fastest, most painless route to solve the problem. And there's lots of times in a club fitting bay, I've went straight to the swing. I said, we're not touching any golf club until we fix your grip, your stance, your fan in the club opening the backswing. I don't have a club that fixes
There's
that.
nothing I can do to fix that.
No. And I don't want to put a club into your hands that fixes it, because downstream, that golf club is going to have more of a detrimental effect to keep you in that state of delivering the golf club, or mismanaging your delivery. So I want all roads to lead to the same outcome, which is you playing the absolute best golf. A term that I've always used, which is the stacking of marginal gains. If I can give you 5 or 6 or 7 things that make you better at the one thing you're struggling with, it's like an insurance policy that if one day I don't have as good of my grip isn't quite as good, well, my stance is better, my ball position is better, and my takeaway, I don't have that club opening quite as much, and I've got the golf club that has the weight in the steel a little bit, and it's a little bit short, whatever it might be. But I stack those things on top of one another, and I'll do that with absolutely any golfer that I work with.
How much have tolerances changed from OEMs over the years? Because, and again, I'll use my example where this question comes from, because I've been out of that arena a long time, and you've been in it and you've seen it. So in my own head, I'm very curious on this. Maybe the listener, what the hell are you talking about? But when we used to pull the clubs apart, some manufacturers, and I'm not going to disparage anybody because they made drastic changes since, I do know that. Thanks to my Golf Spy, I think they've exposed a lot of companies, and those companies have stepped up. But when we used to pull some clubs apart, irons in particular, the head ranges would not follow suit how they should. And we'd have usually the wedges or the 4 irons would be drastically off. And then you maybe have a mid iron that was way off in there somewhere. So my question is, how much has that improved over the years? And then if you're working with somebody and you're going to reshaft their clubs, and you find out that they have some pretty big gaps or distances between, that they're not flowing how they should, how do you go about working with that to make that person still feel what they want to feel?
Yeah, the tolerances have changed quite dramatically. I would say in the shaft space, some significant advancement in the processes. I think when Dick Weiss first created SST Pure, it was to offset how poor the shaft tolerances were at that time. There was some vast differences in sort of shaft performance at that time. Now you can debate, the kind of whether that is as applicable now. And I know I've heard some significant opinions on both sides of the fence. Really strong on both arguments. But I think something like that was born from poor tolerances. When there's so many shafts in the market, club heads we look at nowadays, the range of variance in CT on the head, and from club face polishing to now CNC milling to what's coming down the line is 3D printing. What we're finding ways to just shrink those tolerances, as much as we possibly
Hmm.
can, and we're getting so good now, or I'm not making that up, but the manufacturers are getting so good now at kind of making what they intend it to be. That's exactly what you're getting. You don't really have to. It's not the luck of the draw, the kind of the way that it used to be.
Yeah, because the fellow I learned from, he had been doing this since the 70s, and he was saying if the club companies would spend usually about 3 cents more to the manufacturer, and most of them back then were in Taiwan, then their tolerances would be almost comparable to what Mura is today, where they're getting it down to less than half a gram. And when John Holowati came on, he told me that I almost fell out of my chair, that you can get it less than half a gram. He said, yeah, just they're so good at their precision and grinding if they need to. And it doesn't even change the visual appearance once you set it down. I thought that was amazing.
Remarkable, isn't it? And that was the big draw, to be honest. That's why you saw club builders that kind of what we're doing it maybe as a hobby, but just the kind of small shops. They were only really dealing with the Muras of the world and the kind of the more boutique companies, because those headweight tolerances, when they were building sets so precisely that they were just they were what you wanted it to be, it would be. I'm still shocked at the tolerances I've seen in the golf industry, Pete. I'll be honest. I've been inside pretty much everyone at this point. I've spent time with every custom club manufacturer, Cool Clubs, True Spec, Club Champion, CXG, Modern Golf, only a bunch more. I've been inside all of them. I've been inside pretty much every OEM and seen the way that they do it. The tolerances that which they work within still shock me. They're still as wide as what they are. I'm amazed that they don't chase down zero tolerance more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know why.
I don't know either. I don't know. Have you come across Ishmael Ben Hayoun in your travels?
No.
Ishmael was he does AI for with a lot of club companies. He does a fair amount of work with Cleveland, but the AI models on okay, here's where if we move this, if we do that, the driver in the woods will be more aerodynamic here. So I had him on. It was very, very interesting to hear how they could cut the time frame down. Because remember, back around 2000 or so, in that era, it would from concept to final prototype, it would usually be about 18 months because they just had to see. And then okay, we're going to give it to the tour pros and see how they like it. And then we're going to tweak it here. And then, okay, how do we have to tweak what we come out with for them to what we come out with the general public? He said, no, we can do it in a few weeks with the AI models nowadays. And that just blew me away that they can sit there on a computer screen, enter the data. And I did ask him, I said, I do remember this from club fitting, that we would input somebody's information, that their current clubs, the weight, the profile, the frequency, the grip, the whole deal, and then we'd input their weight. And if they're, as we talked about earlier, if their clubs were grossly off, the profile, the swing weight, the CPM, everything, then I knew that the data that the computer system was going to give us, the recommendation, was going to be skewed because the data that went in was so skewed. It would be close, but it wouldn't be on. And I asked him, I said, how do you make up for that, even in AI? He said, it's learning so quickly that the tolerances are becoming so tight that will almost be not even like 0.00001% of whatever they come up with. But it's technology, as we're discussing on tolerances of anything. I have friends in the car business. They say the way cars are built today compared to 25 years ago is completely different with the parts. So that's
Yeah.
where that question genesis was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one great thing about our sport, and then you think about the safety of people's jobs when it comes to AI and how incredible AI is going to be. How do we relate? How do we create a bond between a player and their equipment? How do we get that to be so much synergy between what you feel and what you can execute? you know, a lot of the stuff I'm studying right now, Pete, is sort of around sort of the neuro sort of capabilities of analyzing people's brainwaves,
Mm-hmm.
and my ability to understand when you feel stress, and when you're in a certain environment that you're uncomfortable. You may not verbalize it, but I will be able to measure it. And me putting you in certain scenarios and stress testing you in a certain way will be a large degree of the success I can achieve in the fitting, will be the outcome of I can change how you feel. Right? I can present you with a stressful situation, and I can change the outcome. You might not again be able to verbalize the brain waves of stress and how many hertz that is sort of emitting. But now we can measure that, and if we can change your stress level over a certain outcome or a certain scenario, and we give you a better outcome, and we change the brain frequency, then that's something that could be completely revolutionary in our space.
I can see that because I know, um, just from my own experience in playing in tournaments, as anxiety levels started getting higher, swings started getting faster.
Yeah.
And for the general public, that means you're now if you're taught now at that level because you're so amped up, and this doesn't matter if you're in your city championship or if you're in Q school. The amping up is proportional to your level, your baseline level of golf. In other words, where you were fit for your clubs, and where I think it's important, or I'm assuming, and you, I want to get your input, is if you're stepping up your swing speed without even knowing it, just because the anxiety level's higher, let's say 3-4 miles an hour, which I think is doable in certain situations. It may be more for some people. And then the way that you're loading the shaft is going to change because you're going faster. Now that the shaft profile and the club that you have might not quite fit you for that swing for that final round or that final 9 holes. Now, I'm not saying go change your swing for something that you're in the final round of the final 9 holes for the other 9 months a year you're playing golf. I think I wanted to bring that up because what you're touching on, I think there's a correlation to that, if I'm not mistaken.
There is. Well, there's certainly a correlation between the fitting doesn't end at the end of the fitting, right? That's important, and it's also part of our future, is that we have to, if you come to me for a fitting and I fit you for 14 new clubs, you've got to know that I'm coming on that journey with you. That journey does not end when you walk out the door having swiped your credit card. I'm with you for the duration that you own those clubs, and I'm responsible for the performance of those clubs for the duration you own those clubs. And you might, it would be my goal for us to create a relationship that if you change something in your swing or you're curious about doing something, I'm part of your team.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes down to that you come and explain to me, I'm not really happy hitting the draw that we set the clubs up for. Is there a way that we can neutralize that ball flight? Because I've found that I'm getting into some trouble when we do that. And you and I work together to neutralize those golf clubs, whether we look at lie angle, whether we look at a shaft change, whatever we end up doing. But I want to be on your team for the duration that you own those golf clubs to make sure that I'm a big team player when it comes to how we perform. We have to be tracking your performance. And there's incredible technology now for that. Obviously, Arcus is doing amazing work, and there's lots of different stat systems out there and apps that you can input the round data. But I need to almost know your problems before you need to know the problem. We've been working on something that is a preemptive system that actually can. I feel like I would be able to know that you have a problem with a club in your bag before you had you were aware that you had a problem in your bag, because you just, as a golfer, you are living in the moment a lot. So, you might hit one left and then you might hit a good one. Then the next round you hit 2 left and you hit 3 good ones. You kind of live a little bit in that moment, but I get the data. Okay, in the space of the last 10 rounds, there has been 11 shots that went left with this specific club, and 2 of them have cost penalty shots. And club by club, we're looking at strokes gained. Okay, that 1 7-iron, that 1 5-iron is causing you problems. Let's come back in and measure it. And to your point earlier about some of the variables, whether it be CPM, whether it be swing weight, Hogan had a set of irons that he loved all but one. And I think he was actually to Kim Braley's father, I believe, but that might be wrong, that part. But I know that he took it to, I think it was Kim Braley's father.
His
Took
dad
it
was
to,
very, very sharp guy. Very
yeah,
sharp
and
guy.
I think he took it to Kim's dad, and they measured the CPM on all of the clubs and Hogan's clubs. They were perfect bar one, and it was the CPM was in a perfect sort of scale and sort of progression bar one, and it was the one club that was having a heck of a time with. And again, back to back to humans generally aren't wrong when it comes to this. He knew he had a problem with that club. You just had to figure out the way to measure it, to figure out what it was, to isolate the variable, to fix it, then obviously, apply it to the set so the set could become, as one again. So, yeah, I think data collection and again, not having it's a continuous loop that we work with the golfers. I've always been so envious of the relationship coaches have with students because I just don't feel that exists in the club fitting space. I think largely because of the behaviour of the people in the club fitting space. I will qualify that.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't want a relationship that's ongoing. I think they want it to start when they walk through the door, and I think they want it to end when they leave. That is the opposite of what I want when I work with someone. I work with my elite junior golfers. I see them 4 times a year. I don't see them once a year, and I might probably 8 out of 10 times I change nothing, and then there might be a couple of times I tweak lie angles and like want to kind of have a look at maybe exploring a new head that came in and that type of thing. But I think that's such a big part of it as well.
Yeah, because I think a number of years ago, the trainers and the swing coaches were starting to get together more because if a golfer's posture is changing, but now they're getting out of C posture, they're getting a little more erect, and now okay, how's that going to affect the swing? And then to leave someone like you out, where okay, if they're more upright, we're not going to leave the shafts the same line angle. They're more upright. It's like, geez, I'm hitting everything off the toe now, Ian. What's wrong with these clubs? Well, what have you changed? Well, I got more upright. Okay, you didn't tell me for 3 weeks, and now played bad for those times. Now we got to get them right, and then you got another couple of weeks to adjust. So you just wasted 6 weeks. If you could have brought me in on that, we could have had it done in 3 days. I think, especially the higher you go, at least this is what I found, that the higher level player, they always think that their athletic ability can make up for shortcomings in other places, or that they don't have to bring the whole team together to discuss these things. But you got to let them find out the hard way sometimes.
No, I'm seeing this more and more at top level sport, and I saw it this past weekend with Marco Penge winning on the DP World Tour in Spain, and all he wants to do at the end of the win was give credit to his team, and he talked about how he's got a strength and conditioning coach. I know his short game coach Alex Buckner really well. I know his swing coach. And all these people, Alex Thorne at Mizuno, who works with his equipment, and all the people around him, and Justin Rose. Look at Justin talked after the Ryder Cup. People ask, how are you able to sustain this level of play at 45 years old? You may well be playing the best golf of your life. You're back in the world, top 10 in the world, or in and around it. You're playing off the charts, unplayable. In those
He
first
almost
couple
won
of
the
days of the Ryder
Masters.
Cup.
He would have been the second oldest winner behind Jack.
If it wasn't for Rory, obviously just pulling off something incredible in that second playoff hole, yep, he would have won the Masters. So the team that these guys talk about is something that I think the average golfer can do also. I think they can have a swing coach. I think they can have a club fitter. I think they can have somebody who works with them on some golf fitness related stuff and make sure they're flexible, mobile, the biomechanics and that are all in order. And I think that is the way that everyone should be looking at this too. We're all part of your team.
Yes.
And we see great software systems like Coach Now and things like that, where you can put a 12 handicapper who wants to become a single digit handicapper, can put all of us in one space where we can communicate accurately and regularly, consistently within the communication. So we're putting all of the things in place for that golfer to achieve their goal. That's not just established for a tournament golfer, a PGA Tour player. Anyone can have that if you want it.
One of the things that has resurfaced recently is, as far as club fitting and shaft is concerned, and I say resurfaced because I remember this had popped up, I think in the late 90s, early 2000s, where the frequency or the stiffness or the CPMs of the shaft, all meaning the same thing, are now being either disregarded, or if there was a list of 20 things in club fitting, that it would be pushed towards the bottom. I don't believe in that. And when people tell me that, I say respectfully that whoever told you that doesn't have a better, or needs to have a better understanding of what frequency flex CPM are. Do you have an opinion on that? And do you have any stories to tell along those lines?
Yeah.
Because I know I got a great
When
one, but I want to hear yours first.
well, I mean, I always love hearing people's experiences or sort of examples of things like this. And the one that springs to mind for me is when Mark Timms and Gavin Robertson at Formula Acro, now True Sports, when those guys got together and they started talking about creating a shaft simulation software, the S3 machine, that Simone Grodin designed, who's an engineer from Queen's University here in Ontario. And when they designed the S3 machine, one of the things that was dispelled very quickly is the disassociation between the CPM value and the EI profile of the shaft. People used to always say that when you measure the CPM, it will only give you the butt stiffness, but it doesn't really tell you about the mid-tip stiffness. It just tells you how stiff that particular butt section is. And one of the things that Gavin and Mark found over time testing thousands and thousands of shafts on there, there's actually a much more significant correlation between CPM and EI and the shaft profile. They're much, much closer than what was previously thought. So, yeah, while we may be 40 inches away from the other part of the shaft if you're in a driver or whatever it may be, and you're measuring with 5 inches on the butt section and we're really talking about tip deflection, it still is a representation of the way that shaft will perform when you measure it in the butt section. There's not too many examples. There is a couple that I can think of that are exceptionally or uniquely designed, but as a whole, it is very, very close to correlation.
Well, did you have an opinion on why you think this is resurfaced, or it continues to be something that is touted as new, and this is going to make you better, and this is going to do this and that? And I just don't follow it. How you can have let's just use a higher hand or mid-level handicap that's been playing golf for years. They're a retiree. They're 65, 70 years old, and a club fitter can sit there and tell them, you can use this X shaft because the profile fits you and you're going to be just fine. It's like, you can't put the same shaft in that person's club that Rory McIlroy has in his driver. Guy's swinging 127 miles an hour.
I don't think people know what they're talking about when it comes to the matchup profile. I'll be honest. Like, I see lots of these online Q&As that go on and people talk about shafts that are similar to other shafts. Majority of the time, they're not even close. They're not even close. No, and largely because they don't have access to the machinery that can test the EI profile the same way. So unless you have access to an S3 database, or even what Russ Ryden has his store where he can measure EI profile, there's really not that many places out there, and there's not that much access to a library of EI profiles where you can genuinely match up specs. So I think what people end up doing is that they go, well, the manufacturer says it's a mid-launch, or it's a whatever balance point. I hate all these terms; they drive me bananas. But people go, well, it's similar because the manufacturer says it is,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's another thing that is just, drives me bananas. When I used to hear shaft manufacturers talk about, we're going to bring out a high launch, low spin shaft. I go, how have you managed that?
Yeah, that's my first question too.
Exactly. Like, how have you done that? How have you separated the ability from the shaft to manipulate the golfer's swing to create a strike point, an amount of delivered loft, an angle of attack? How have you managed to do all of that with the shaft to know that you're going to get high launch? Well, we've made it a little more tip soft. Well, if you make it a little bit more tip soft, generally when you put that in a better player's hands, you see them try to offset the amount of deflection. This is something Paul Wood and Eric Hendricks at Ping and I have talked about, is give better players a softer shaft. They will lean the handle more to offset the amount of shaft deflection.
Mm-hmm.
So the intent of the shaft designer can be offset by the adjustment made by the golfer. So the complete intent to create a high launch, low spin shaft or launch conditions at a high launch, low spin can be completely manipulated by the player's ability to feel or their feel of what's actually going on in their change. So those things just drive me absolutely, crazy. I'm curious to hear your thoughts because, when you say it's resurfaced, my feeling is things like CPM are trying to be brushed under the carpet
Yes.
as things that are not important. I'm seeing a lot of that right now because as companies try to scale their businesses, it's more difficult for them to explain and train people what that truly means to the point where they can actually deliver that type of information in a meaningful and useful fashion. They would rather just pretend that was not a thing.
I think, and I'll preface this again, as I have said, but that I have not been in that space. I've been around it. My brother's has did fitting for the IGG Academy for years. He works for Cobra Puma, does a lot of their fitting. He was their Corn Ferry Tour rep this year. So I'm indirectly associated with still, but when I did it, we did, the guy I worked for, again, he was regarded as one of the best, if not the best in the country at the time. Now he's ornery as hell. He doesn't talk. He's in his pushing 80, and I love him to death. And if he hears that, I know hopefully he gets a chuckle. But I don't think that people, first of all, understand CPM, meaning that they wouldn't have any comprehension of how to determine what any particular golfer should have. Should there, instead, at my age, we did 6-iron, but nowadays we do 7-iron fitting. Should a person's 7-iron frequency be at 315 or should it be at 285, or what range should that person be in, and then how to dial it in for their into that range? Because all of the shafts that we had in the trailer when we were fitting, there were hundreds of shafts, every one was raw frequency. And then, not me, this was his part of his genius, was he would know based off the club design, CG, hosel length, hosel depth, heel to toe, height, sole, the whole shebang, how much to tip trim and how much to butt cut to match the profile of the swing that the person that was going in for. So it wasn't just that person, it was those clubs. And if the clubs changed, you couldn't just swap out shafts. It had to be different. So I saw it at an extremely, extremely high level. And then to take it further, the playability factor between CPM, between steel, table roll graphite, and filament wound graphite was roughly 8 to 9 cycles between each one. So you couldn't take, again, going back years ago when some people still had steel shafts in their fairway woods or driver, you couldn't take a 270 CPM driver shaft, get it, what is the majority, a table roll graphite, a Fuji, or fill in the blank, Diamana, anybody, and have a 270 and it play the same. And then you definitely couldn't go to filament wound and have a 270 and play the same. There was a difference, and you had to understand the difference between those. So I think there's a big misunderstanding, and I think that it's dismissed because maybe a lot of people don't know where to go to have a better understanding of how to utilize it. Now, I don't dismiss profile or anything else, torque and all those other things, because I think it's all part of the fitting. It's what people come to you for. And again, I don't do it anymore. Anyone calls me, I'm saying go see Ian, go up to Canada. And maybe not this time of year, but come next June or July. It's a great place to go. I understand it, but I don't know. Once you get to a certain level and you don't understand how things have changed when you've been out of something, it's very difficult to go back and try to do things at the same level. And I'm at the podcast now. I got other businesses. I don't want to sit there and try to learn for maybe a dozen fittings that I'm going to do a year. I'd say here's the very good people in today's world to go to. I can't recommend enough you go see them, and they understand all of it, and they will make sure that you get what's right.
Well, I think for so many people who will be listening, I'd love to hear, whatever platform that they digest the podcast on, I'd love them to share some feedback with you on that particular thing of all those things you just listed out, and even the CPMs of a driver playing 275, or an iron playing 320, whatever it may be. I think that's, you would say back to that's double Dutch. I think that's something that's a language people don't understand because it's largely been forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really get taught. Most the things that people are exposed to now do not have any part of that in it, where people want to even share that type of information. So in the broadest sense of people say all the time, go get fit. Be careful where you get fit, right?
Yes.
Because if you get fit at somewhere that really doesn't understand the full picture, of what's going on, I call it 3D club fitting, because I think 2D fitting is looking downrange at a golf ball and looking at launch spinning speed. I just think
Mm-hmm.
that's two-dimensional fitting, and that's when you start going, I'll give you a high launch shaft. But when you add the third dimension to it, you start understanding how the relationship of a shaft and head and grip, work with a player, and you start adding in the golf ball component and starting, influencing friction and how you can manipulate the relationship between club and ball every which way, and then you start to become the psychologist. How can I get a golfer to get them to do what I want them to do, deliver the club how I think is the best way for them to do? How can I give them a club that sets them up for success from that perspective? I just don't think that stuff's being done anymore. It's just everyone's looking for a shortcut and a fast track to get to the, in and out,
Mm-hmm.
the conveyor belt of fittings. That's why I just don't think it is a one and done process. I think it is truly an infinite loop of working together to get things right. So yeah, I'd love to hear people's views on, after hearing you talk about and us talk about some of these nuanced things when it comes to fitting that are maybe lost. Like, have you ever even heard of those terms before? And I would imagine most people, even the new club fitters that are entering the game, this post-COVID boom of people seeing, and I actually, I'm a pretty humble about a lot of things in life. But I would say we're probably responsible for a lot of young 20-something-year-olds that kind of around COVID that were watching our YouTube channel and this and that kind
Mm-hmm.
of got involved in the game. And, they bought themselves some technology and they put some Ventus in the wall, and all of a sudden they're a club fitter. No, and that's not to discredit anyone. But where's the barrier to entry? There is none. And, this label of master club fitter or master builder is just, it's given. And it should never be given. It should be earned and achieved. And I just think that a lot of even some of those types of people will be hearing us talk about CPM in that way and some of the variables that really are impactful. I'd love to hear more about your old boss and the way he built golf clubs, because it's just, that art form is dying.
It's like, yeah, I relate it to the pyramids. No one knows how they built the pyramids, and we still can't
Absolutely.
replicate it today. And as I hear, I think people are taking shortcuts. I used to call it paint by numbers, and I have nothing against technology at all. In fact, I'm a proponent of it. If anyone's listened to the show long
Yeah.
enough, I've had people on here, but I say the Mona Lisa was never painted by numbers. It would have never been as beautiful as it is. I'm sure that with technology, they can make a canvas that I could, who is not painting expertise by any means whatsoever, and I could sit there and use the right colors that they tell me, and it would look very nice, but it would never be the Mona Lisa. And it
Yeah.
takes a lifetime or many years to develop the skill as you have in that field, learning. And I also will say this, that there is a difference between learning it in a lab or even in a hitting bay and learning it
Yep.
out on the golf. It's like working in learning it in a classroom and then going in a clinic and actually having people come in and working with them. There's a major difference.
Major difference. And I used to say that to my guys all the time, that those guys that I said that got really good within 2 years, the one thing I knew, that if you threw them off and you gave them something, they were so proficient in a club fitting bay. But and I used to travel the north end of Scotland, to the north and middle of England, and then often into Ireland to do fittings and things like that. I used to have to adapt regionally based on who I was working with. There'd be players that if you go to Aberdeen, where it's particularly windy on the East Coast, that would hit the ball so significantly lower. They would load the clubs, they'd swings would be shorter, they'd load the club differently. I would travel out to do a demo day in maybe kind of the southwest of Scotland, where it's much more wet but not very windy, and those conditions would be totally different. And I think the ability to adapt in different scenarios and settings is a huge part of it. So I think what you've just said there is so true, that I don't know if that will ever be achieved again because of the environment the club fittings happen now, which is in a lab. And that's a problem. That's a problem that's worth solving, is just this environment of, what happens, the golf club that you've given someone with these strong lofts, and they start playing off of uneven lies. And,
Hmm.
they've, a little bit of a downhill lie. And all of a sudden they can't flight those irons, to save their life. It's fine off of a plush mat in a bay. Like, even that's something that is worth investigating. Paul Wood and I, when we were talking about indoor club fishing mats, I said to Paul, what numbers do you get off of your hitting mat indoors? He said, well, we've got a really thin tile mat, and it actually tends to strike quite low in the face. And we actually launch it. The launch is a little bit lower and it spins a bit more. And I said, well, that's interesting, because at TaylorMade we had really thick plush mats,
So it's hitting
and
higher
I
in the
always used
face.
to hit higher in the face, and it would launch up with less spin and a little bit less ball speed. So even just hearing that with Paul, he started talking about, well, what if you could regionalize that? What if you literally had a range of 6 or 7 different turfs that, depending where someone comes in from, we can manipulate strike height based on the density of the grass effectively. So indoor versus outdoor is really not about grass versus synthetic grass. It really is just about recreating where that strike occurs. If his contact should be, our low point is ahead of the golf ball, our interaction with the turf shouldn't really be significant until the ball has left the club face.
Hmm.
So what difference does it actually make? Well, it only makes a difference when we start to see impact occur. We know the clubs sink down into the turf. How much resistance does the turf offer to the sinking of the club at and post impact? We can resist more and we can resist less. That's going to manipulate strike height. So there's all these sorts of variables that have to, again, be considered within the fitting process for it to be considered accurate and valid.
The one story that I had on shafts and frequency, that the idea that stiffness is almost irrelevant, was the Sandra Post story. And Sandra was a
Right.
Canadian, retired at 36, I believe, but she had won 18 times. She was the phenom, the Michelle Wee, only that won more than Michelle of her era. And she played shafts that were very stiff, and because of that, she had to practice all the time, every day, except I think she took off, like she told my boss, basically Christmas and New Year's, or it might have been her birthday and Christmas, because I think her birthday was in the spring, but had to practice that much to keep her timing. And to me, I just thought that was crazy, that you should not have to do something that much to keep your timing. And when she found him, I was not working for him yet, because he used to winter at Innisbrook down when Jay Overton was running the show down there. Jay had him down. Her and her husband came in, and he did a set of clubs for her, and she was at the back of the range for 3 hours. She was supposed to be there for 20 minutes on her own, and came back and said, do you mind if I come back tomorrow and hit balls? And her husband said, this is the first time that she had been retired for about a year or so, maybe more. And he said, this is the first time she's hit balls for more than 20 minutes since she retired, because she couldn't. Her joints ache so bad from swinging so much. And when people tell me, friends or colleagues tell me that, we've gotten better numbers off of very stiff shafts for a whole assortment of people, beginner to elderly to very good college players, many toured guys, girls. I say, yeah, but you're getting numbers off hitting in a bay, or even if you go to the range, and they're repetitively hitting that club, they're making adaptations. But what adaptations are they going to be able to make counteractive to who they are as a human being, their how they work, function, biomechanics, everything, over the course of a week, a month, a season, or multiple years? Are they going to be able to compensate consistently over that time? And the answer is no. Nobody on the planet is that good. Tiger Woods was not that good. So that's just a kind of an added story of my experience with when people say frequency or CPMs has little to no effect on a club fitting. I just say, wow, that try to steer people maybe away from that.
Without a shadow of a doubt. We've seen examples of shafts over the years. Like, remember the nunchuck shaft of a few years ago, and the nunchuck was supposed to be a shaft that was for everyone, right? It was like a one size fits all.
Like a
And
pair
then,
of shoes. Here's a size
yeah,
10. This is going to
here,
fit everybody.
go for it. Everyone, these were company for everyone. And that was, that was the most ridiculous thing. And it was also a little bit of the case when I saw the Autoflex phenomenon come out, and people would say, yeah, but it stiffens up at impact, and what a lot of nonsense. I mean, like, I took a dive into that in sort of non-Newtonic materials and shafts that could change in their pliability based on the force applied, essentially, right? And I was like, this is really something, because this could be revolutionary. That you could take a shaft that has variable dynamic performance. So if you give it to a junior golfer, it can flex appropriately for them, and give it to Adam Scott, and I reuse Adam Scott because he was the one who I saw the video of him talking about it, saying, it straightens up at impact. I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I just, at times people give some of these tour pros way too much credit for what they know, and they're incredible athletes is what they
Yes,
are.
they're
Their ability to
unbelievable, and
adapt.
you don't get that good without putting in an enormous amount of time. You can't be that good at that thing and know the science of the shafts as well. It's not
Correct.
possible.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And the AutoFlex phenomenon. It introduced people to a shaft profile that really hadn't been, looked at for a long time. People had went away from softer shafts and shafts that were more dynamic in performance to shafts that were much, much stiffer. And it was just the reintroduction of that to a lot of people, that people said, wow, this is easier. I feel like it's easier on the body, like you say. I feel like I can create lots of energy with it. And the thing's a wet noodle. It's going to have some movement.
Did you ever come across or play with or test the Fine One shaft?
No.
It was stepped graphite. It was, as far as I know, still today, the only step. And this was going back. It started as the Apache shaft, and it was mainly on the long drive circuit, because friends of mine were on the long drive circuit. And then it was a professor from the university in Korea that was the mastermind behind it. And then the university, of course, maintained the rights to it. And it was making some big headway, because I don't remember the specifics, but it was getting up to 3% more distance, because the tolerance and impact and squareness and everything was so much better, and up to 7% better dispersion, which at those speeds is very impressive. And it was, in talking to the guys, it was 3 pieces of stepped graphite that were fused together. And I asked, there was one fella, his son went, this is 15 years ago, his son was 15, went to the junior academy here. Where'd you go?
Yeah, I'm still with you. I'm just
okay.
plugging in my
That kid was the youngest kid to ever qualify for the World Long Drive Championship at 15. Now, 15 years ago, his 3-wood numbers, he was getting 180 plus ball speed. It was unbelievable. But anyway, his dad was the only distributor in the country for that shaft. And I think that the university had no money to put into getting it in the hands of people like you, or on tour, or somebody playing it. And I think it just eventually fizzled out. But I was just curious with the amount of shafts that you've seen, if you had come across that. I don't even think anybody can get them anymore. I don't even think they're manufactured.
I have heard of stepped graphite, and I haven't heard of that particular company. I remember Apache shaft. I remember KJ Choi using the orange Apache shaft in his irons that and then became matrix shafts after that. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting designs that kind of have been a little bit lost, and like what you said about the pyramid, I've kind of looked at a little bit of that sort of stuff, and a little bit of that kind of like that lost advanced civilization that people talk about, and the people who talk about the methodology of the ability to move massive and large objects through micro vibrations and things like that, 500 kilogram blocks, and move them very easily, and at that time, and it's like it defies logic. And in a micro sense, I love that analogy is compared to what we are, because the art of what we do is being lost, and the ability to make shafts a certain way, and Apollo with the hump shaft that Jim Furyk used, and there's all sorts of examples. But I'll go back to the safe space that golf is living within now, and I think people are a little bit afraid to try something that's truly unique and different, just because we're kind of in this. I kind of call it like a lazy mode. Like, I love the Ventus shaft line as much as anyone, and I love the guys at Fuji, and a huge admiration for what they've done, creating that shaft that's so dominant across the professional tours. But it has made club fitters lazy.
Mm-hmm.
It really has. I mean, I've watched so many videos online of supposed elite club fitters, and the player walks in with a vented, and all of a sudden they go, "Well, you're using a really good shaft, so let's focus on the head." And they completely overlook, just because someone's in a vented shaft, that there might be a different shaft that's better for that golfer that they may get better results with, and they completely overlook it. And I think that's the direction that we're going a little bit right now. I think it's a case that you put a ventus in anything, and off you go, and it'll work really, really well. And it's just not the case.
Where do you see technology taking club fitting going forward? Because you have experienced almost all of it. TrackMan came, or I think the first launch monitor that I saw was in 2000 or somewhere around there. No, it was 2003, but it had been out a couple years in the big OEMs. So you and I have come along with the introduction of launch monitors, and now we've got all the TrackMan, Flight Scope, Foresight, the whole list of companies. I apologize if I left anybody out. Please don't get mad at me. And then everything else in technology. Where do you see the next advancement, whether it's in metallurgy with club heads or you mentioned 3D printing earlier? There's so many different things. Do you see, or maybe I should ask, what do you hope is of the technology is the thing that takes hold that will better and advance the game, as opposed to just being, hey, this is the greatest thing, and it really doesn't work for a lot of people?
Um, well, I think 3D is going to be huge in the golf space. I think a few companies are obviously getting their handle on it, and I think once it gets into, especially metal wood, I think it's going to give us more discretionary weight to play with, because the head, you can make in these lattice forms that give us, it may free up 50 grams of discretionary weight rather than 12, right? Which we're kind of seeing
That's a
something
lot.
like that right now.
That's a lot of weight to work with.
If we start talking about being able to have, 25% discretionary weight versus potentially right now it's maybe 10, that's going to give us the ability to dial it in that little bit more. So I think that's huge. I think you were at the PGA show last year.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen a time at the PGA show where there was more technology on display?
No, it's turning into a tech conference.
It's a tech conference. It really, really is, and I couldn't believe it. And I just think the integration of technology, the layering of it on top of one another. So it used to be cool that you had a launch monitor,
Mm-hmm.
and go down and see that guy. He's got a force plate. And now you're starting to see people with force plates and launch monitors and motion capture and the sensor's edge and whatever it might be. And you're going to these places that is just a tech hub. And there's usable tech, there's wearable tech, there's tech that will study, as I say, your performance, your data from post round, and start to be able to give you clues in terms of why you played or did not play well. We're just in this rapid sort of increase in usable tech in the golf space right now, and I'm so curious as to where it's going to be in kind of 10 years time. If I think back in 2015, where we were in 2015, things were pretty good, but it didn't look like it did does right now. Nothing sort of like it. 2005 to 2015, probably not that different, a little bit, as I say, movable weights and heads and stuff like that. But, I think in the next 10 years, my gosh, it's going to look very, very different.
It's accelerating. It's going so fast. I have a YouTube a video on club fitting that was one of the first videos I did. It's actually horrendous. The only reason I keep it up is to remind myself, like, here's where you started. But I think it's got well over 200,000 views, which for me is that's
Wow.
by far the most. And the comments on it, God, you're terrible. This doesn't make any sense. I'm like, and I read those comments again just to stay humble and to remember what it was. When you think of quitting, say, hey, look, here's where you were. Here's where you are. That's an advancement. Keep going. You'll continue to get better. But are there? And you've done a lot of videos. You're very, very good at it. But are there any that were surprising for you, whether it was the result or the comments, or that resonated more than any others that stand out? over the years?
That that was the joy of it. Everything was surprising. There was, we would find things that we completely did not expect to find. And, we done a test one day. And again, I always refer back to people who I believe know more than me. We done a test one day where we sat a golf ball in hot water, boiling hot water to try and soften the cover. And we put one in freezing temperatures. And we kind of hit them both, because I think the consensus would be that, and whether we've done the test right or wrong you know, is relevant, of course, because it ended up in a set of results that shocked us. But the consensus would generally be that the golf ball doesn't fly as far when it's cold, it flies a little bit further when it's warm. It was the complete opposite.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the golf ball that was firmer had a higher rebound speed than the golf ball that was softer. And, we kind of got to then start to be very curious about golf balls. And, we kind of started likened it to, well, you inflate a basketball, bounce it off the ground, going to bounce higher, you deflate a basketball, you soften it. And that became the whole compression story that unraveled a few years ago, that my golf spy kind of, with that chrome soft golf ball, they found that it was very, very short in their testing. We ended up having a bit of a ding dong with my golf spy at that time, because we were really interested in that test, and we tested it, and we did not find that to be the case at all. I think they had said that there was like 19 yards shorter or something like that than the whether it's a Pro V1X or a Chrome 2X, whatever it may be. But we tested them side by side. Actually, we done it that night of reading that test, and we found 3 yards of difference. It was next to nothing. And it just got me so curious to test these things. So we tested so many things, whether it's rust on a wedge. We'd hit golf balls with rusty wedges and not really see a difference. We'd spray the face, make the face wet. That rust would become like an oil slick, and the golf ball would just slip right off of it. And the rust was actually a significant deterrent to spin. So people used to always really desire rusty wedges because they spun more.
My brother used to put a wet washcloth on his new wedge and then put it in the basement.
Yeah, we all did. I mean, the Cobra, Trusty, Rusty, all of those sorts of raw wedges. We all used to want that. The reality is, rust adds in a variable that you do not want. It can mess with the coefficient of friction, and it can have a significant detriment to the consistency of and predictability of what your golf ball does. So when we started to discover all these types of things, it was just, it was fascinating. Wet wedge test, that was one of my favorite ones. We would take, a ping wedge with the hydropearl finish on it. We would take, a Cleveland, I think it was an RTX4 at the time, and every other company's wedge. We would hit them dry within 100 RPMs of each other per spin, and launch was maybe a degree or so different. We'd wet them all, and all hell would break loose. And the differences in launch and spin would be so vast. I never forget the day we released that video. A friend of mine who worked for Cleveland was on I think he was on one of the kind of end of year trips where they take a bunch of key accounts to Pinehurst or somewhere, and we're all on the bus going there. And we released this wet wedge video, and they were sitting with all the big wigs at Cleveland on this bus on the way, and we kind of decimated the RTX4, and like it was by far the worst. And at the time, he sent me a message going, "Everyone at Cleveland has just watched your video, and like the jaws are on the floor." And I'm like, I'm not lying. I love Cleveland wedges, I always have, and I love the people at the company. I just can't lie about something like the performance. So if you guys want to show me that I'm wrong and maybe prove me, and he came back a few weeks later, and the guys were like, they tested the same thing. You're absolutely right. And it ended up leading on to them going down this route of trying to make their wedges better perform in the wet. They tried to prevent the sort of degradation in the hydrophobic or the kind of hydrophobic coatings that you've put on a wedge, and they started exploring that as another key performance. That's amazing. And we feel, we were feeling really proud of what we were doing with our little R&D lab on a Monday, that we would do these things. So that was what I loved about it, Pete. I really did. We would discover something new all the time. It's
pretty cool that you can have that influence. And when you know you do it right and you stand up for your principles, even an big OEM calls you out and say, "No, man, show us we're wrong, and we'll we'll do another video. And then they call
Yeah,
you back and say, no, you were right. I mean,
yeah,
that's got to be a very good feeling on your part. Not just that you're doing good work, but that your morals, your principles and ethics and everything else are in the right place, and they're not for sale.
yeah. And we've also done videos, and that you're right. That is absolutely key and paramount to the whole thing. I've also done videos where I've not released the video based on. We actually done one recently. It was on with Titleist wedges and Titleist irons with this new groove design that they've got within the new C series irons, and the ability to retain spin at certain kind of characteristics. And we were seeing, I had tested that at TPI, and I had saw a significant amount of spin retained in a certain amount of rough. Call it like quarter-inch of rough. And then I tested it when I got home, and it was much more like probably quarters of an inch of rough. And I couldn't release the video because the scenario was totally different, because we saw a totally different set of results. In that, so we never ended up releasing the video because I didn't believe like I could stand behind the performance of the test. And even though we saw a set of results, I didn't believe that they were sort of true and accurate.
Yeah, it's very good. And it just develops trust when people, I'm sure people hear this, or I hope they hear it. You got to beat Scott's record. Calx is the number one all-time downloaded. So I'm going to send him a note.
What was Calx at? How many downloads did he get?
I've got to look. I check it about every 6-8 weeks just to see who's still there. And I always send him a note, and I'll even post to say Scott Calx number one downloaded episode ever. And just to pump his ego a little bit, because he doesn't have an ego. So I pump it up a little bit.
I'm not surprised that, anytime we do videos together, they do massive amounts of views, because he offers massive amount of value. And, he has insights that you'll hear something you've never heard before. And I get that every time I'm with him. And I'd like to think that he and I get together and he maybe hears a little bit of that from me, and we start talking about some of the players that he's working with, and he'll give me some scenario, and he'll say, what do you think about this and that? And then, I'll give some thoughts. They'll be like, okay, I never thought about that. I'll get back to you and see what you do with that. And I think of all of these things, Pete, like almost like the Avenger franchise or the Marvel franchise. Iron Man's great, Captain America's great, but when you put them all together, they're an incredible, unstoppable team. And people in golf, like you were talking about earlier, with regards to the kind of types of forums that you're trying to get people together to get people to share ideas and share knowledge and their expertise. You put people together, and it's amazing the chemistry you can get from people with really good minds.
But I want to get into the emergency 9. I got to get you on to, you got more important things to do today. But before I do, I probably should ask this question earlier. It might be the most important one that probably everyone out there is thinking is, if someone is not a really good golfer, and let's say they're minimum double digits or higher, or even newer golfer, why should they get fit? Or should they get fit?
You cannot get your equipment. Well, I will always stand behind. For me, the golf swing is the most important piece of the whole thing. And if you cannot develop a sound fundamental golf swing, you'll never play that game and enjoy that game the way you should. So fitting is, for me, the link between being able to swing as consistently as you want to swing and get the consistency of the result you want to achieve. The golf club is the link between those two things.
Mm-hmm.
You can make consistent golf swings, but your golf clubs are inconsistent. You never get consistent performance. And it's very, very difficult if you put the wrong clubs to get your golf ball to fly correctly.
Yeah, that simple analogy I used to use was, you wouldn't run them to the end of your street in a size 8 shoe if you were a 10, or you wouldn't wear a 12. If you want to become a decent runner, you're going to have to get the right shoes. So absolutely get fit. Even if you're just starting out, get the length right, the lies right, and some basic things right.
100%.
All right. Yeah. You ready for the emergency 9? All right. This to have some fun and wrap up, and I get you out of here. Let's say, I always ask this one, your game gets really good. You fit yourself. Scott's got you swinging it great, and you go and you win the U.S. Open and the British Open the same year. And DP Tour calls and says, we want you to be in a Ryder Cup, Ian. What song are you going to have them play when you walk up to the first hole?
got to be. I'm stealing it from Bobby Mack because they played it for him in the Ryder Cup, but it's got to be Proclaimers. I would walk 500.
All right. Let me write that down. Very cool. Hollywood calls you. They say, Ian, we've watched your career from the time you raised your hand at that PGM or at PGA class and want to be a club fitter. And we're going to make a movie about your life. And we're going to let you select what actor plays you. Who are you going to have them pick?
I think from an age demographic, I know he's done a little bit in golf with Bagger Vance. I think Shia LaBeouf would do a nice job of playing
There you go.
a young Ian Fraser through the years.
Very cool. He's very artistic, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's a smart guy.
This one I'm curious to your opinion because you deal with tech and clubs and everything, and all the club junkies will probably hone in on this question. Your favorite purchase, let's say in the last year, under $1,000. Now, I will preface this. It could be a swing aid. It could be a club, something to do with club. It could be something for your house. It could be anything, but always curious to hear what guests are spending their hard-earned money on.
Well, I'm going to cheat with this one.
Okay,
because
you're allowed.
I'm fortunate in the position that I'm in that, I have a Foresight launch monitor that I didn't pay for. I have technology I didn't pay for. So I just built a home simulator for under $1,000.
Wow.
So that was very fortunate that I was, I had people who could build it. I had people who could, build the platform and frame. A great relationship with Synthetic Turf International and the turf. So I was able to build a home simulator for under $1,000. I know that's cheating, but by far that is the best money I've spent.
God, a lot of people mad at you on that one.
Yeah, a lot of people mad going, my God, I just spent $50,000 on that thing and you're telling me it cost you less than one?
If you could work with all the people that reach out to you, social media, YouTube, Instagram, all of them, if you could work with any historical figure, could fit them for their clubs, help them with their game, who would it be?
Hogan. Just some of the stories of Hogan and his, I think people would go, oh, he's not said Tiger. But Hogan was so into his equipment. I was really, really knowledgeable about equipment. Hogan knew that he had a tree on the range at Shady Oaks Golf Club, and he used to get his caddy, when he was doing his loft and lies, he had a tree that was at a certain apex, and he used to adjust his loft and lies based off of the apex of the flight and how it would sort of compare to the height of this tree, and he'd move back 10 yards for every club that his clubs, doing stuff that we do with launch monitors back in the 50s and, years and years ago. And just that type of curious mindset, you used that word at the start of the podcast, and I just think it's appropriate for exactly where my mind is at, and someone like him, just that never-ending pursuit of getting a little bit better. So I would love to have worked with Hogan.
Yeah, that'd have been very, just to get a glimpse of what was in his mind, what he was thinking about.
Yeah, and the measure of the man, the determination of him to kind of go through what he went through and sort of be great and then be injured and have to kind of come back, and the mental fortitude. And I think on the surface, what you see people and how you see people is never a true reflection on who they actually are. And I was always conscious of that, with the YouTube game, that when I first started it, I used to think to myself, people might not see who I am on this YouTube game. Social media is very different. And I thought to myself, how can I get people to truly understand who I am as a person? And the only way I thought I could do that was to do it for a long time. Because if I do it for a long, long time, I'm not an actor. I can't show up and be someone who I'm not. So as long as I'm not a fleeting, here today, gone tomorrow type of person, and I stick to this YouTube game for, 7, 10 years, people will truly know who I am as a measure. And I thought, to me, Hogan, what he would do showed who he was, the person, which I always admire.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of playing the long game. And people told me when I started the podcast, it's too broad. You're never going to get anyone to listen. It's never going to grow. And it's grown slowly. And it's gotten, I'm not going to get to 180 plus episodes with the guest list I have if it wasn't good. But I just it was I never did it for money. I just did it to very curious mind like you are, and then we've talked about just you want to learn more and you don't ever want to stop. And one door opens up four more, and it's like wow, look at all this information. So yeah, stay curious is
Yeah.
very very good way to do it. Uh, Fun one. What's worse, a well done steak or iron head covers?
Well done.
That
I
is
can't
bad.
stand a well done steak. Love steak. I love steak. You know, iron covers don't offend me as much as they might offend some people. I would lose them, so I could never do it. But yeah, I love a good steak, so there's no
Yes,
way
me
I'm
too.
butchering that.
It drives my girlfriend crazy. I got a pellet grill, and I was never a griller, but it's made me the king of grilling.
Yeah.
It's simple. You cook at the temp, pull it off, and oh my god, it's just like the picture. And then she goes and she puts like A1 or something. I go, what are you doing? You're ruining it.
Yeah.
Just let me eat my
What
steak
sauce
how
are
I
you
want
having
to.
with it? What?
Oh, I'm like, no, you're ruining my masterpiece. You can't do that. Another food one, golf or is it hot dog at the turn is a big one. What are your go-to condiments? What do you like on your hot dog?
Can I say no to the dog?
You can.
No to the pork missile? No, I think that I tell you what. One thing, you know, nutrition and wellness in that space is another thing that I'm hugely passionate about. Dodge the dog. Dodge the
I
dog.
think I had my first one at the alumni event in maybe 10 years and heartburn paid for it the rest of the day. My God, it was brutal.
I know. That's the thing when you don't know any better and you try these things, you think it's pretty good, and then obviously a little bit later in life you know what's in these things, and then you realize no, that's it's a terrible idea. Yeah, there's a lot of good things at these halfway houses and things like that nowadays, but dodge the dog.
Okay. Another food one, since everyone's always interested in food. You've been all over the world, so I'm very interested to hear if you could put a restaurant in your kitchen, what restaurant would it be?
Nobu.
What was it?
Nobu.
Oh, yeah. No. Is that the one in New York?
The first one I went to, I think, was the first one I went to was actually Dubai at the Atlantis Hotel in Dubai. And to be honest, Pete, growing up in the west coast of Scotland, the breadth of culinary experience was not that significant. There was a scale of fried food from fried Mars bars to fried fish and whatever you could fry. So going to somewhere like Nobu and in Dubai was it just blew my mind. Would you taste that good? And then the lunch all over the world now. But yeah, I would that first time I tasted it made by them was just mind blowing.
I went to the one in New York. I've been to the one in Vegas, but the one in New York was unbelievable. I mean,
Incredible.
and I had just started eating sushi then, and I was hooked at that point. When you go to a place like that and you have sushi, it's like, I mean, you're hooked for life. You got no choice.
Yeah, and I always say to people as well, like when it comes to people say like what type of business are you trying to run? And I always say I'm trying to run a club fitting business that's like Nobu because I don't want it to be about coming to see Ian Fraser at the club fitting studio I go to. Just like when you go to Nobu, you're not going there because you don't know who the chef is.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going there for a level of experience and an outcome that you know is inevitable. And I want to think that people, when they come to our club fitting studio, the outcome is inevitable. They walk out with better clubs and they play better golf. I want that to be the inevitability.
Yes, I'd recommend a book. I'm reading it now. I got it from Patrick Bet David. I was at his conference. I'm not saying I know him. He didn't say, hey, go read this, but Unreasonable Hospitality. It's about a fellow that owned the number one restaurant in the world in New York and the things that they did to get outside of the food. The food was spectacular, but how do you make somebody who comes there for dinner just take their experience to the whole next level? And it's very small, simple things that
What was it called?
Unreasonable Hospitality.
Yeah.
I won't get
I'm
into
always
it.
looking for that stuff.
I'll let and there's a number of 5 to 15-minute videos of the guy who was the owner. I can't think of his name right now all across YouTube, but you can type that into YouTube and you can see him and he'll tell some
I'll
of his
message
story.
you offline about that one.
Okay. Favorite club in your bag?
I always gravitate towards. I don't know why, but I always gravitate towards my 7-iron. It just, it's a club that's made me consider the set and kind of even how we should fit the set. Because, like you say, everyone fits off a 7-iron,
Hmm.
and I think that's wrong. I don't think we should fit off of a 7-iron, because when I look at the sort of the variables of performance and delivery, I don't, just because you're picking the one in the middle doesn't mean that you're representing the one at either end very well at all. So, yeah, but to me, like, I just, if I'm warming up, if I'm hitting a few shots, if I'm doing the bulk of my practice, 7-iron's the one that gets the majority of the work.
Okay. And then the last one, in your opinion, greatest of all time golfer.
Um, hmm, I actually listened to a podcast. We were debating this yesterday. Um, for me, it's Tiger. I know Jack has the record and has the major record and second places and incredible. I think it's about who played the game at a higher level. That to me is what I look at, and I think it is. I think it's up for debate that Tiger had a healthy run at it, a clean run at it. The amount of majors he picked up between 97 and '08, 14 of them, if he had another 10, 12 years on that US Open at Torrey Pines,
Hmm.
he probably would have reached in excess of 25 majors. So I just give it to Tiger because I just think he changed the game in, I think, more ways than Jack changed the game.
Mm. Yeah. And you can, anyone can argue both, and everyone's reasoning on why is correct as well.
Yeah.
I just, it's an interesting question. There's no right or wrong answer. It's why it's the last one. What, you have anything coming up? Are you going to talk somewhere? You got classes you're teaching, that we can tell everybody about?
Not so much in the North America sort of area right now, but I'm in Hong Kong in a couple of weeks. We've got our fitting store that's opened over there, and the guys are doing incredibly well. Trying to bring trying to bring uh, top tier club fitting, as I see it, to the whole world is my mission. That's the mission I've got, which is why really while I'm in the position I'm in right now, I'm focused on Asia. I'm focused on other markets and taking this really to every corner of the world. And I won't stop until club fitting has been done correctly on every continent, to be honest. So that's what I'm focused on, and really working with whether it's the PGA of Hong Kong, which we'll be working with when we're over there, trying to kind of get a feeder program for them and their students and people through the PGA of Hong Kong to give them an avenue where club
Hmm.
fitting is reasonable. That's where I'll be doing the majority of my educational work. We're working on a few things for the PGA show. I'm not sure. I'm hoping that we can pull it off. We can do something that's, again, a bit of a kind of open forum. It's a great platform, but there's been things over the years. But Acroday used to have like a panel of speakers that would talk about club fitting, and it would be like a Q&A type thing with Mark Timms and Woody Lash and guys like that are amazing to hear from. So we're trying to do something like that at the PGA show. Whether we pull it off this year or not, I'm not too sure, but that's where I'd like to be doing something annually as well. Obviously, Fraser Golf Institute, where we're
Hmm.
doing our performance related stuff, which is a bit more in the coaching side of things for right now. We're there every Monday and Thursday with our videos on there. So there's definitely still plenty of spots that people can be tired of hearing me talk about my nonsense.
And where can people find you across social media? Give it your YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X now, all that stuff.
Yeah, really, Instagram is the only social media network that I really can interact with, and so at Ian Fraser Golf on Instagram, that's the only one I'm really active. I don't really use TikTok or X or any of the other ones. YouTube, obviously, Fraser Golf Institute is where you can obviously check out our videos, and again, anything that's related to performance in this space. We are taking a break from the club equipment review side of things. A few different reasons, but we had done it for 7, 8 years, and the repetitiveness of the way we tested golf clubs got a little bit stale for me. And
Hmm.
I kind of got to a point where I didn't think we were really doing as good a job as we should. So I thought taking a backward step and maybe looking at how we've done that and then coming back with a fresh perspective was really something I would be excited to do. So that's kind of where we're at with the equipment side of things. But we're still active on YouTube and Instagram.
Very cool. And everybody, as you know, all those links to Ian's website, his social media, everything will be in there. I'll even try to find what was the video, the golf ball video. I'll try to put a link of
Yeah,
that in the summary so everybody can check that out, and they can sit
the
there and
warm versus cold
the
golf
warm
ball one.
versus
Yeah.
cold, that they can sit there and argue it in their 19th hole about which one's going to go longer. Ian, it's been great. I can't express my gratitude enough. Everybody told me how great of a guy you are, and you exceeded the expectations. So I enjoyed sitting down, and I can't wait to see you at the PGA show this year, or well, next year.
Yeah, likewise. And thank you for what you do by bringing everyone together in the golf community to have these types of conversations. Knowledge is only good if it's shared.
Hmm.
And if we keep all the good stuff between our ears, then we're not really doing, anyone justice. We've got to pass it on. I'm only sitting where I'm sitting because people have passed on great knowledge to me. And it's my role to do that and pass it on to other people. You do such a great job with the podcast and getting people together to share that knowledge. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Hang out just a minute or two, everybody. Thanks for checking us out again. We'll see you next time.